everyone. Today we're going to be talking about setting up a drawing that has multiple points of perspective and drawing a perspective drawing that is imaginary. So how to set that up. Let's talk about multiple points of perspective first. Let's use the example of this image here from the Acropolis in Greece. So this building has 2 points of perspective. If I'm just kind of glancing at it and guessing how I would set this drawing up, I can tell that when I look at the diagonals of this building, they converge at some point over here, which means that one of the vanishing points is going to be within the page of my drawing. However, when I look over at this side, I see that these diagonals seem to converge at a separate point, and that point is going to be way off the edge of my page. It's going to be somewhere like over here. So unlike setting up a 1-point perspective drawing like we did last time, where everything converges in the middle, when you're setting up a drawing that has multiple points of perspective, more than likely you are going to need to have some scrap paper or something like that that will allow you to plan out where everything converges, because it's not going to converge on your sheet of paper. Let me explain to you what I mean. For the sake of this demo, we're going to pretend that, let's pretend that your large sheet of paper, your final drawing, is like this size, right? So if we're pretending that, then what you would want to do is have a setup where your large sheet of paper was surrounded by scrap paper. Your scrap paper could literally be some like butcher paper, or some people draw directly onto their desks, or you could rip sheets out of your big sheet of paper, pad of paper, and you could tape them down on either side, and then you could establish your vanishing points on those sheets of paper. It'll make more sense in a second. For the sake of this demo, let's pretend that everything here is way bigger than it is, and this is going to be the final size of my drawing more or less, and this surrounding it, this is all just scrap paper that I'm going to use to set my drawing up. So, for the sake of this demo, I've got that same image of the Acropolis, and I printed it out kind of small, and I'm trying to set it up here on my scrap sheet of paper so that I understand how the drawing is built based on where the horizon line is and where the vanishing points are. I've gone ahead and I've drawn in a horizon line. I haven't taped anything down yet because I'm trying to establish where the horizon line is. Remember, the vanishing points, where everything disappears into, they are always located on the horizon line. Mostly. Let's just stick with it for now. There's some complications where they're not, but for the most part, with stuff that we typically see, the vanishing points are on the horizon line. So I found vanishing point number 1, which was pretty easy to find. I just followed some of the diagonals of the building, and they all converged here. Now I'm going to follow these lines here on the diagonals of side number 2, which is being influenced by a different vanishing point, and I'm going to find where these lines converge, with the knowledge that they are going to converge on the horizon line somewhere off the edge of the paper. I'm having a hard time because my printout here is so small. So let's see here. If I follow that, nope. Heavens. Let's just say it's somewhere. No. It's somewhere over here. So that means that all of the stairs are going to line up over here. The diagonal of this part of the roof will line up somewhere over here. And so I can see that if I were drawing this on my actual sheet of paper, that would be where my vanishing point would be. So how would that work in practice now that you understand the theory of it? In practice, what you would probably do if you were working with multiple points of perspective is that you would set up your situation with the scrap paper, with your actual sheet of paper taped down. And everything taped down so there wasn't any crazy shifting around. At least 2 pieces of tape. And then you would establish where your vanishing points were, and you would draw them from there. So I'm going to just quickly do an example here where I'm going to draw something that's kind of out of my head. It's going to be loosely inspired by this building here, but the operative word is loosely. When I look at this building, I see that this is the corner of the building that's closest to me, meaning that everything that is on this side is going to be receding more or less. These visible sides here that are tilted this opposite way are going to be receding towards vanishing point 2. And the ones that are tilted this way are receding towards vanishing point 1. And so now that I know that, I basically, those are the ground rules, and you're free to play. What I like to do when I'm drawing something from my head is I like to set up my 2 vanishing points, and then I'm actually going to use a smaller ruler for this. I like to find that like first really big vertical that's going to rule everything else and is going to determine where the 2 sides converge. So for me, I'm going to choose this vertical. I get the words vertical and diagonal confused sometimes. That's what the big pauses are about. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw that down. So this is I'm going to begin by drawing that sort of castle tower. And then I'm going to draw another line that's parallel to that. Then I'll draw the line of the opposite side of the tower, which is going to be smaller because less of it is visible. And that line got a little bit less than parallel. And now I'm going to go ahead and start tossing in some of my verticals. Yes, vertical, diagonal, horizontal, that all just drives me nuts. Okay, so this will be the top of the tower. And then I know that where points converge, this is going to be going to the opposite side. So this will be like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm kind of referencing the photo. So this photo here has the building ends in a wall, which is going to, you can see me sort of thinking through it and making it up as I go along. Because this is just, I keep like looking over at the image, but this is ultimately going to be just a total like fantasy building. Sometimes if I kind of have an idea of the things that I want to draw, what I'll do is, and I'll use this smaller ruler, I'll just hold the ruler down on the vanishing point and just shift it around and draw like lines that are pretty close together, because I know that they're all going to be aligned correctly if the ruler is lining up always on that same vanishing point, if that makes any sense. So I'm like tossing in a bunch of lines, and then I can start to draw in some verticals. And you can hopefully with a few more lines you can begin to see where this will start to come together. So goes all the way back there, and you don't necessarily need to draw the line going all the way through back to the outermost edge. I just did that so that you can kind of tell how I'm building this thing out. When it comes to drawing things like, now I'm kind of working on drawing a tower on this left-hand side that looks something like this. This is a more challenging shape. We talked about drawing things like they were see-through in the last class, and that can be super helpful when drawing something like a tower, because what you want to do is find the center of this square shape. So what I'm doing is drawing out the interior of this box shape, and then I will find the center of it by drawing diagonals from corner to corner. So this is the middle of it right here, and then I can drop a line up from the center, and I know that my roof will slant from the topmost point down to the edges of the roof. So then let's see here, if I'm going to move up and I'm going to draw now the turret of the castle, and I have already established a lot of my lines through the vanishing points. So when I start building things out, like here is the turret of the castle, I can, I'll move my tape briefly so that I can access that part of my drawing. I know that these diagonals will roughly follow the diagonals that I've already set up, that as the corners recede towards the vanishing point, this is going to be slightly smaller than this area. And if I'm going to start sketching in the actual turrets of the castle, that I would be able to see some of the sides of them here, but I would see less of the sides as they neared the topmost corner. I'm going to go ahead and drop a few more lines with my ruler. Looking for the little one, and it's disappearing on me. And I'm going to just go ahead and align it with my vanishing point. I'm still like building up. Oh, there's my little ruler. Some important information. Stairs. I'd like to add some stairs potentially. When I'm adding stairs, what I do is I just hold my ruler up to a point, and I draw a ton of tiny lines that get slightly bigger as they get closer to you. And I draw them longer than I need, and I also draw them so that they slant the way that I would like the stairs to actually slant. From there, you can go back in and draw the actual shapes of the stairs like that. I'll just go ahead and sketch in some other areas here so you can see how you might a little figure to give a sense of scale or something. So here's like, you know, at the very end I might toss in a little person and they're looking up at this sort of castle place, and you'll notice that I've lined up their feet so that they are also within perspective and make sense with the scale of the place. So that can be a good way to add more interest to your drawing. Now, what I've set up here is still relatively simple. We've got basically just 2 vanishing points, and everything in here, I've set it up so that it's all going back to vanishing point 1 or 2. If you wanted to add yet another layer of complexity, you could set up 2 vanishing points, and then let's just say I had somebody who was last semester was drawing street scene in Prague. So it looked kind of like it was just a single point of like vanishing point, 1 point perspective, but the truth is, in a city like Prague, stuff was built. Some of it was built in the 1300s, some of it was built in the 1980s. So you might have 2 buildings on the same street, and they were built centuries apart. So even though they're next to each other, they don't have the same vanishing point. So remember that, because that's true of like most places and most things. So let's pretend that this is, you know, we could pretend it's a building or whatever you'd like, or a tower. And it actually has 2 vanishing points right now. And there is going to be something beside it. And you might assume that something beside it would have the same vanishing point, but as a matter of fact, something beside it is doing its own like whole different thing. Something beside it is actually like in 1 point perspective. Because if these were 2 buildings, one of them was built in the 1980s and the other one was built in the 1300s, and they're actually still 2 buildings on the same street. So if you're struggling and you're like, you know, something in my drawing looks off, even though I've done the perspective correctly, it could be that it's not you. You could be, yeah, the perspective is just fine, but maybe what you're looking at, it's just like a different sort of a situation for a different object, and that's okay. Like, either you can just fudge it by kind of like drawing different angles until it feels right, or you could try and set up a different perspectival situation to get to the bottom of whatever it is that's weird. A final thing that I would like to talk about is a lot of the stuff that we've set up, we're talking about drawing boxes more or less, like different kinds of squares and rectangles and stuff like that. There are tons of rules that govern how to draw different types of objects. I'm going to use the example of drawing a pyramid in perspective, and I know we're still within sort of box world, but this tip, at least for me, kind of helps me think about drawing other types of shapes. So let's say you're drawing a pyramid sort of in the style of the pyramids of Egypt, the Great Pyramids of Giza. The footprints of the pyramids, they're in Egypt, at least, and a lot of them in Mexico, are square. But of course they converge to a point. So in order to find where that convergence happens, you would first draw the base, and then you would draw 2 lines that connect the corners. And I find this super helpful when drawing roofs, more than one roof. So at this convergence point, that's where the highest area is going to be. So you can go ahead and draw up And then I determine how tall my pyramid will be. Let's say it's going to be that tall, and I draw one point. That's kind of a tall pyramid. I regret it immediately, but I'm going full speed ahead. And then from each of the corners, I'm going to draw a line up to meet that point. So then if I erase out the excess, you can see how you can build up a different type of shape by finding the center, drawing up from the center, and then finding the convergence at the center. Other types of objects and tips for drawing them. If you are drawing something that is irregular, let's say, oh, I should have thought of what I was going to draw before I started this. Let's say you're drawing a giant letter in the sky. It's like an apparition, and it's flat, like kind of like a cookie cutter shape, and the surface of it is flat. However, it has some depth to it, so it's just like a thick A. A thick A floating in the sky. What you could do in order to make it look dimensional is at every point where there is more than one plane meeting, again a convergence, you could drop a line down to the vanishing point, and then you could decide how thick the object is. So let's say it's like yay thick. If you then erase out your excess lines and you do a bit of shading, you can see how you can create the illusion that that object is like a dimensional chunk. If you have set up a situation like this and you want to add people walking, you can draw two imaginary lines, and the width of the line will be the height of a person, full stop. So in this situation I've set up, I'm going to say that if a person is standing this close to the viewer, they are that big. However, if a standard person is standing, I'm trying to do one that I can still be big enough to draw, standing this far away from the viewer, they are that big. So drawing imaginary lines can help you standardize objects that are not geometric. Like if you wanted to add trees or bushes, same sort of rules would apply. So those are just some extra thoughts that I had about tossing stuff in perspective out of your head, and I look forward to seeing what you make. I hope you have fun with it.